I've been riding this bike from new in 2023, so I thought it was about time I gave you a long-term review of it. Now, I will admit to being a fan of the Africa Twin, but I promise I will keep this video as balanced and objective as ever. To be precise, this is a 2023 Africa Twin Adventure Sports ES DCT. Now, I picked this up in the middle of 2023, about May time, and we've travelled some 10,000 miles together. We've had some really memorable trips, and I think that means that I'm now in a position to give you an idea of what this bike is like to live with. So let's start with reliability, because that's an easy one to cover off on this bike. Since I've owned it, this bike has been absolutely faultless. I have had not one mechanical or electrical problem at all. The only problem I've ever had with this bike has been a flat battery, and that was my own fault. When I broke my leg last year, I was laid up for a couple of months, didn't touch it, and I just neglected to put a trickle charger on it, and the battery ran flat. So from a reliability point of view, I can only give this 5 stars based on my experience. Fuel economy has been good for what is a big and heavy bike, and I'll talk about that side of living with this a little bit later on. I've kept the trip record since picking up the bike, and I've averaged bang on 53 miles per gallon. That's a real world number covering everything. I've toured around Ireland, ridden to Germany and back through the Ardennes. I've explored local country lanes, run errands and slogged up the motorways, the lot. For a bike that weighs 250 kilograms in standard form before you start putting any other accessories and luggage on it, I don't think that's a bad return. The bike does get criticised, particularly on online forums, for only having 100 horsepower, and it does in that sense look a little bit lacking to some of its competition. But anyone that's ridden one will know that in the real world it's more than powerful enough. The 105 newton meters of torque sits nice and low in the rev range, and it peaks at just 6,250. Even fully loaded, the AT still pulls very nicely. Yes, of course, it's not going to win any sprint races up against things like the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S and Multistrada V4S, and for that matter the new R1300 GS from BMW. But don't be mistaken, it's no slouch. For me, I think it offers the perfect balance between power, comfort and smoothness for this bike's intended purpose. In all the time I've ridden this bike and other Africa Twin iterations, I've never felt that I really needed more power. Now, I prefer to ride it with the seat in the higher of its two positions at 870 millimeters as opposed to the standard 850. The lower seat position would offer a little bit more ground contact, but I prefer the leg angle the higher seat offers. And that is one point worth making. If you have got really long legs, then you might find this peg position just a little bit tight. Removing the rubber peg inserts of course helps, and I also fitted a set of SW Motec Evo foot pegs which allow the position to be lowered. That led to a very relaxed bend in the leg, offering greater comfort over long distances. I think they're a worthwhile investment. The standard seat is fine. I've ridden on this for hours with no problems, but other users do report these as being a little bit uncomfortable after a certain amount of time. But that is of course a very personal thing. One observation I will make is the vinyl on that seat can get a bit sweaty on really hot days, so fitting something like a cool covers mesh cover over that will really help. But outside of that, as you can see, I don't really have a problem with it. I've not had to do anything to that to make it more comfortable. The screen on these bikes are now adjustable, and at its highest point I can sit behind it at motorway speeds with my visor open, no problem. But again, this very much depends on your height and the helmet that you're wearing. But usually you can find a decent position using the adjustability in the screen. Adjusting the screen itself is pretty easy, but not while you're on the move. Ducati, amongst others, have nailed this with super easy one-handed operation. This screen requires levers on both sides to be pinched, which is fine, just not when you're moving. Perhaps that's a built-in safety thought, but an easier system would be appreciated. Whilst we're in the cockpit, one area that does come under a lot of fire are the controls, particularly this left-hand cluster. Now, I will freely admit this is not the most intuitive setup, and if you take one of these bikes out for a test ride for an hour or so, you will struggle. But once you've spent some time learning it, it's easy to operate. Would this stop me buying one of these bikes? Not a chance. The reality is, now I've got the bike set up as I want, I hardly ever feel the need to play around with it. Changing riding modes is easy, just press up and down on the arrow buttons. There's a favourite button that you can program to access your most used functions, and things like heated grips are simple to operate, but no doubt there is big room for improvement. And whilst I'm looking at a couple of gripes, the Apple CarPlay Android Auto system is another one which I think could be improved. Now, I can only speak for the CarPlay side of that, as that's all I've used. It is a brilliant system and the touchscreen display is excellent. There is, however, a rather specific order of connections to get things working, and if you don't do it in that order, it ends in failure. Having said that though, once you've set it up and you know which order to connect those in, it doesn't really give you any problems. It does still require a wired connection, which in itself isn't an issue, but there's no provision to store the phone, so you'll either need to mount it on the bars or tuck it into a tank bag. You can of course shove it in your pocket, but then you're tethered to the bike. Now that can obviously be fixed by the use of a cheap Bluetooth dongle, but it shouldn't have to be. If I can buy one of these for 30 or 40 pounds on Amazon, somebody's making a profit and get it to work fine, then surely Honda could incorporate that small piece of technology into the bike somewhere. The 2025 bike is the same, so we'll just have to wait and see if they make any development for that in 2026. A lot is also said about how slow the TFT screen is to boot up, and I have to agree. However, because of this secondary LCD screen below, you can just start the bike and take off. You don't have to wait for that screen to start up. As you can see, you've still got vital information shown here, and then the main screen will just do its thing in a few seconds and come on. People whinge about it, but for me it's a complete non-issue. The cornering lights are much more useful than I expected. Admittedly, I have had Denali spots in place on this bike, but with these lights, the more you lean, the more they light up the apex of the corner, and you don't realise how good they are until you don't have them. Definitely a thumbs up. I spoke about size and weight earlier on, and there's no denying she is a big girl. Moving the bike around whilst you're off of it can be a little bit cumbersome, and you do need to have your wits about you. But when riding, you really don't notice it, even at slow speed. The trade-off is the planted feeling of the bike, as well as a 300-mile range that appears on the dash when you brim the 24.8 litre tank with fuel. And that range is achievable if you're careful, but it can be a little bit hairy. I have in the past ridden this where I've got that range down to single digits, and in one scenario when I couldn't find fuel it was down to 0, but I still managed to keep going for quite some time. And when I came to brim the tank up, I wasn't getting anywhere near the 24.8 litres, so I suggest that there is a much more generous reserve level of fuel in here than you would imagine. I do have another tiny gripe, and it is a tiny gripe, it's not really an issue, but it's worth pointing out. Never trust the outside temperature gauge on this bike. I don't know where they placed the sensor for that, but my theory is it's near a heat source, either the engine or the exhaust. Now when it's sat here like this, the air temperature does seem to be pretty accurate. Once you start moving though, that all goes out of the window. Engine heat is managed well, and I've never felt it warming my legs or feet uncomfortably, although some users have reported that. But even in 30 degrees C temperatures, it's not an issue. If moving above that temperature, then any motorcycle is going to roast you in slow or stationary traffic. Moving on to handling, and the Africa Twin offers exactly what you'd expect. It's planted, sure-footed and neutral. The 21-inch front wheel does slow the steering down a little bit, but it's still a bike you can roll from side to side easily and have some fun in the twisties. Braking is good, but there is some dive on the forks. It's less noticeable on the ES version, but some may find it too soft. For me, I'm happy with the trade-off for comfort, and it can be beneficial when off-road. I haven't ridden this extensively off-road. It is big and heavy and not something I want to tackle technical terrain when riding alone. If this pins you down somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you're in trouble. I did spend 2 days at the Honda Adventure Centre where they used the standard model, still a big bike, but I was surprised at where I could take that bike with only my basic off-road skills. This bike will probably take you further off-road than you think, but that is again down to the skills and the competency of the rider. If you're doing things like the ACT routes and simple graded trails, then this will be fine for most people. If you want to take it down routes that are better suited to enduro bikes, then you're going to have to be either very skilled, very brave, or very stupid.
One thing I haven't yet spoken about is the DCT. As you'll probably know, I am a big fan of it. I think Honda have obviously been doing this for many years, and that system has been developed, and it is an engineering marvel. Now they've tweaked it even more for the 2024 model onwards. Changes are faster, they've moved some of the sensors so there's less delay, and they've just kind of really enhanced it on. But even in this model, it's an incredibly advanced system. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but only, I say, a little bit. Once you've been riding for an hour or two from your first ever ride, you get it, and the more and more you ride it, the more you adapt to it, and the more you learn how you can actually control it. It's just a great system. It's a lovely system, and if I get the opportunity to ride a Honda that has got a DCT gearbox, then I will always take that option. And that's what I love about this bike. It is a very easy bike to ride long distances. It's super comfortable. We've got a nice riding position. The screen gives me good protection. You can munch miles in it in comfort. But also, if you want to get into the rough stuff, then you've got the ability to do that. And on a nice dry day, you can have a lot of fun around the twisties as well. I just love it. It fits me. It's comfortable. It's fun to ride. I like the look of it as well. I still think it is one of the best looking adventure bikes on the market. Not many have surpassed it. And it sounds pretty decent as well. There's a stock exhaust. It's quite raughty. This has obviously got the SC Project exhaust on it, which is a little bit lighter and just offers a little bit more of a growl. For me, it's a bike that it's kind of an SUV, I suppose. It does a bit of everything. I can go commuting in it, I can shop in it, I can tour in it, I can ride off-road in it. It does everything that I want it to do. Yes, there's a few niggles as we've highlighted in the video, but really they don't detract from the overall package. I absolutely love this bike. I said at the beginning that I would remain objective with my review, and I have done that. I think I've done that, but as I said, it's just one of those bikes that tugs at my heartstrings, and I don't think I could ever see me being without one.
It has been a fantastically enjoyable bike to ride. It munches miles with ease in comfort. It can be loaded up with gear, but at its heart, it's still a fun bike to ride. It's a bike that I gelled with pretty much as soon as I started riding with it, and over the time that I've had it, I've grown incredibly fond of it. As I've said before, there are more powerful adventure bikes out there that are faster. There are some that are lighter. There are some that are more fancy. But there is just something about the Africa Twin that plucks and tugs at my heartstrings. And surely that is what riding motorcycles is all about. Ride the bike you love and love the bike you ride. Having said that though, if you do follow the channel, you may be wondering where all of the extras are that were fitted to this bike. There's two stories behind that, but the main one is that in a couple of weeks, this bike is being traded for a new 2025 model. As you can probably tell, I absolutely love this bike, but an opportunity came along that I couldn't really ignore. So I'm going to go and pick this bike up in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to let you know what I think of that and whether I've made the right decision. I have, of course, already ridden the new model at the European launch, and I really enjoyed it. Could it prove to be an even better bike for me than this one? Only time will tell. With a long-term review, it's always difficult to establish exactly what you want to cover in it. I didn't want to make a 45-minute, hour-long video looking at all the minute details of living with one of these bikes. I just wanted to concentrate on the important things, the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the positives and the negatives, and then you can go away and make a decision on the bike based on that. If you do have any questions about it, if there's anything that I've not covered, if there's any glaring omissions that I have not included, then pop those in the comment section down below and I'll come back to you as soon as I can with a response. And all that leaves me to say is until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye. And it is bloody freezing, so I'm going home for a cup of tea.